Welcome. Welcome to episode 274 of Nurah Speaks, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. I am glad to be back with you on the podcast. And if this is your first time, I want to thank you for joining. This is a podcast that is intended to uplift the Black community, to help shape ideas, to help guide our actions so that we could be useful and productive. Um, I think we need to create meaningful change. I think we need to take meaningful actions that lead to meaningful change. We have a lot of people that just talk about issues. And so, what I share here on the podcast are some applications that have been effective, that have worked in the community, the work that I do in my community, the work that others have done. And so, I want to talk about in this episode. I think it's important that we dispose of the idea that we can use morality as a motivator. And I think about the efforts of our the brothers and sisters that came before us as they worked to advance change through the civil rights movement. And so many people sacrificed so much, not just their time, but many their lives, their health, their safety, their dignity in so many respects, so that we Black folks in America can our have an acknowledgement of our human rights. And I believe that we have it wrong when we think and act out as if the problems that we are experiencing are moral problems, or that the issues that we have can be resolved through a political or voting process. And I don't think that there is going to be a moral appeal that will save Black people. I don't think that there's going to be a political movement that's going to save Black people. I believe that what is going to save Black people are Black people. And we've had our share of appealing to the morality of others. We've had our experience of striving to create political change. Now, as I speak, I don't want you to think that I don't think we should stop engaging in the political process, especially those local elections. I believe that there is a place for us to engage politically where we can establish what it is that we need in some cases. However, when I think about these national elections, um, because of the access to representation through voting is being stripped away for Black people. I recall reading where someone said, no, there's still one person, one vote. And somebody responded in the comments, yeah, until you get to the electoral college. So, there is that. But I believe, yeah, that engaging in democracy and making a choice, making a selection, making your voice heard, making your needs heard, to those elected officials who are already in office, or whether someone wants to enter into the political process locally because they believe that um, they can establish a needed change. I have no problem with that. However, what I'm talking about is the collective, the entirety of Black people looking at our condition and saying, "Oh my gosh, we have to vote somebody in office and that'll save us." Right? That'll be the answer. Well, we've tried that, and that has not been the answer. And we have Dr. King, who was interviewed and said, he's concerned that he is integrating his people into a burning building. And, whether the building is burning or not, I think we are being shown that we are at least unwanted in the building as it stands today, And so as we're watching the right to representation being clawed back, and we are not being permitted to be represented in districts by someone of our own choosing because of the redistricting and all of those changes that are happening. If the right for representation can be just taken away, um, did we ever have equality in the first place? Did we ever achieve equality? If someone has the ability to take away our ability to participate civically, did we ever really achieve equality? If we have to be amended, right? I mean, I think about the the 3/5. I always, it's kind of joke, kind of, it's not really a joke, but the cow was a whole cow, the chicken was a whole chicken, uh, the horse was a whole horse, but the black man and woman were 3/5 of a person. There was a 3/5 compromise, um, and between the North and the South. And so for someone to have to uh, uh, pass legislation so that we can have the ability or the right to engage civically, well, then that's just a law, and laws change, and we're watching it and we're watching it happen. And so at a time where we are looking at the opportunity to engage civically, civil rights, we still have yet to achieve the acknowledgement of our human rights fully in this nation. That's not something that we can deny. So we have to think about, what does equality look like? And I think about equality is the fact that the sun shines on the just and the unjust alike. Equality looks like whether someone's black or white or other. The law of gravity applies whether you pass a law, whether you repeal a law, whether you amend the Constitution. The law of gravity applies regardless. Right now, that's equality. The idea that we think we can vote someone in office to represent us, the fact that we think we can appeal to someone's morality to reestablish our ability to participate fully in the political process, that's just not what we need to advance our own interests. And while some will work through the political process and through legislation, and we're grateful when we have very good actors who are dignified, who represent our interest, um, and do that well, while we do appreciate those people, I think it's misleading for us to look for a salvation through a political process. I believe that our salvation will only be achieved by us deciding that we have to unite with each other, and recognize the humanity of each other. We're in a nation where our humanity was trounced upon, not acknowledged. The love of self was just beat out of us, so much so that we thought, and mistakenly so, that integration would be, some sort of panacea or solution to our issues. And we've been quickly shown in 2026, and in fact, that is not the case. So if we want equality and justice, we have to look to the author of equality and justice, and we have to look to each other to establish and act upon that. And the source of equality and justice is not the same source that we were told or taught of during our captivity and period of brutal abuse. And so, I'm grateful now that I do hear leaders, political leaders, or personalities on television or on podcasts talking about the idea that, maybe we need to think about what we need to do for ourselves with each other. And I think that there's value in that. While we are still a part of the broader America, I think we are wise to think about um, the ways that we can work with each other, the ways that we should be working with each other, and not there's a saying that some Black folks say that during integration we thought that the the white counter, that their ice was colder, so we stopped buying the ice at the Black counter. When we were segregated and could only buy ice with each other, we went to the counter of the white man, uh, whether we were uh, invited to or not. And then once integration happened, we, really felt as if we had arrived, and we wanted our ice, from someone else, someone other than ourselves. Um, but, water still freezes at the same temperature, right? That's also a law. So we really need to rethink um, what we believed is the solution to the concerns, the ways that we are going to improve the outcomes. When I'm talking about outcomes, I mean, I'm not just talking about those lofty, abstract thoughts. I'm talking about the health disparities. I'm talking about us being able to feed ourselves. If someone decided that they're going to shut down the supermarkets or not put supermarkets where we live, right? They are called food deserts for a reason. Well, if our communities are food deserts, what are we doing about it? We don't have to uh, always wait for someone else to be the Superman or have the Messiah complex that someone else is going to mitigate our challenges, right? We can look to the right and left and say, we have to study, we have to learn, we have to, encourage our children to go into fields, whether that's dentistry, uh, that's medicine, cardiology, agriculture. Go into fields so that fields of study so that we can address our issues, meet our needs. And there's nothing wrong with that. While we are still part of this broader fabric of America, this broader landscape, but we have to think about what happens when they turn the spigot off, right? What are we going to do? And I think we're getting very close to facing something like that today. And so often we look to the solution being what someone else is going to do for us. And on this podcast, I say we have to look to what we are going to do for us. So I want to thank you for listening. I'm interested in your thoughts, what your opinions are about this. Um, what your opinions are about, this upcoming, we have an election. We're in the midst of primaries right now. The midterm elections are coming. What is this going to mean for us? And regardless of the outcomes of the elections, what are we going to do for us? Thank you again for joining me in this episode. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe to Nurah Speaks on YouTube. Subscribe where you're listening right now on your podcast streaming app. Make sure you like and share, and feel free to leave me a comment. Thank you again. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. What I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Nurah Speaks. Look out for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, you can visit my website, nurahspeaks.com. Or if you have a listener question, you can email me at nora@nurahspeaks.com. You can also follow Nurah Speaks on X, Instagram, and Facebook at Nurah Speaks. I will be sure to include links in the show notes. If Nurah Speaks has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.